don't know how to feel about Marius. I'll admit, I don't think I like Marius. And that feels wrong because I know he's such an integral part of like the Anne Rice lore. Like I know how important he is. I know how important he is to Lestat. But Marius made some choices. Hold on, backing up. Hi, if you're new here, I'm rereading all of the Vampire Chronicles because I read them originally in high school. I read this in high school. Should not have read this in high school. Probably any of them, especially Pandora. Pandora I missed, but revisiting them now, I can greater appreciate what they actually do well, how just gorgeous the writing is, how much we love these characters. I can appreciate all of that, but I can also question now what's kind of really happening within them in individual moments. And I do think it's important to like question and be a little critical on the things that we love because this book for me had a lot of like peaks and valleys. It had a lot of moments that I was absolutely all in, devouring every single word, loving everything. But then there were moments where one, the pacing did slow down now and then. A couple of times I realized I was a touch bored. But I also knew that once I got through those moments, it would peak again, and I was fine. I got through it fine. But there were other elements where I'm like, "And what are we doing here?" But non-spoilery thoughts first, because I want to focus on the stuff that I like first. I want to focus on like positivity forward. I do want to talk some like framing device stuff, but that'll be like at the end. That'll be in the spoilery section. But non-spoilery stuff first. Just talking about the things that I liked because I did like this book. So this installment is about Armand, obviously. And while we kind of know his origins from like Lestat and everyone else, we already know the basics of Armand. Now we actually get to see it fleshed out from his perspective. And a couple of scenes in like the early bits, early stuff of the series kind of recontextualize, i.e. the important one being Claudia's death. So we follow Armand as he's trying to just survive his very confused and like memory blocked early years. Like even early on as a human, he was already going through so much trauma. And so we're with him from that beginning to when he gets like picked up by Marius. And then the story really takes off and fleshes out from there. And Marius basically set up this school in 1500s Venice. That's the time setting we're at, 1500s Venice. He basically set up this school to help take in a bunch of kids to house them, make sure they're fed, make sure they're safe, make sure they're clothed, make sure they're, like I said, but just make sure they're safe and like educate them, making sure that they're ready for the world in the future on when not really like being adopted. It's not an orphanage, but once the kids reach a certain age, it's I think the main goal is just so that they can like survive and be okay out in society. And Armand is clearly his favorite. So again, sticking with the things that I like, that I enjoy, the prose, absolutely amazing. The writing is always gorgeous. There's not so much a spoiler, quick little like teaser, the bit where like Armand reunites with his family. Oh my god, that was written so beautifully. That was so nice. I've mentioned previously that you can like track Anne Rice's like religious themes and her rediscovering and her questions and her religious journey through these books. You still can because Armand is definitely a part of that. Those religious themes are very strong here, along with the sexual liberation themes right alongside that because you can have both. And I love the duality there. I love the duality there. Now, we're still in like the not spoilers section, right? Everyone knows about Armand and Marius at this point. We know how those two are connected, and I will admit we know Anne Rice likes to blur the lines between what love is between two people. My asexual ass absolutely loves it. But there are elements where they're like, it's a little uncomfy. Marius is a grown man, not even including his vampire years. He's a grown man, and Armand is 17, human wise. It's a bit of an age gap. Duh. It's a bit of an age gap, and it's a little uncomfy. But we know Anne Rice's way, and she still writes it in a positive sense, and it is mutual. It's mutual on both of their parts. I will also admit that Marius, while he set up this school of a bunch of kids, Armand is really the only one he seems infatuated by. So there's that. Okay, so now we're getting to spoilers, and it might get a little ranty on my part, but not like angry rants. A little ranty because it raised some questions and emotions. This book is strange. So like I said, full spoilers from here on out. I think Armand is kind of known in the fan base as like our chaotic little gremlin. I think it's kind of Marius's fault. Not 100%, but like a good 75-60%. 70%, whatever. It's mostly Marius's fault. His early years did not help, and the Children of Darkness later on also do not help. But it I think some of it stems from his time with Marius. And I will argue, Anne Rice didn't intend this. I don't think it's intentional on her part. I don't think she intended to make Marius this, like, manipulative. So while that is painting my picture in my head of Marius, there's a weird duality going on of, like, you're constantly framed as, like, this good, pure, wonderful person. And, like, sure, but also, like, hold on. Okay, focusing in a little bit. So when Marius picks up Armand, right? He takes him in, keeps him safe, gets him some, like, actual clean, dry clothes, gets him good food, lets him rest, just takes care of Armand, picks him up, right? Great. Of course, Armand is gonna see this beautiful man that is as like a deity saving his ass. Of course, Armand is gonna be a bit infatuated with him. Of course, he's gonna catch some feelings when there's a lot of stuff going on. So that little romance, like, happens, and the moment Armand asks Marius to, like, make him, like, because he doesn't know about the vampire stuff at all yet, he thinks Marius is just some, like, magician. So the moment Armand asks Marius to be like him, Marius, his reaction is that classic vampire sense of, like, no, you need to experience humanity for what it is. You need to grow up more. You need to experience some things. Let me help you in that sense. Let me take you somewhere. And he takes him to a brothel for 3 days and then just dips. And then it backfires. Marius, dude, this backfires so bad. Because sure, Armand got to experience a lot of things in that brothel. He had fun. Good on him. But now Armand wants that dynamic with Marius. So that's a dynamic that is, I'll admit I'm laughing. It's a little funny. Just on how ironic that backfired so badly. But again, that's what I mean by the unintentional manipulation of Marius. He didn't want it to go that way, but it kind of did. And also, like, Marius, are you really surprised? This boy is infatuated with you. And if you introduce him to sex, he's gonna want that with you. Like, okay, that's just Anne Rice playing with the kinky side of things, okay? That's fine. We know that bit. But also, like, there's that. But also, there's another point that is a definite turn against Marius for me. First off, he acknowledged that Armand was too young. Armand is 17, but he was dying from, like, poison. Armand was dying. Marius didn't want to lose him. Turn him into a vampire, right? He was dying at 17. But he acknowledges that 17 is too young. That was tragic. That was sad. We also know that Claudia was too young at 5. So we have established that kids and teens should not become vampires. They kind of can't handle it mentally. Chaotic little gremlin as he is. Although I will argue Claudia was doing fine. She was upset. She hated it, being stuck in a body of a 5-year-old, but, like, she was fine. She was handling her situation okay. Better than Armand, I would argue. There's this new little character, Benji, who's written as a bit of a Middle Eastern stereotype. I think it's a little uncomfy again, because he's just this 12-year-old kid, quick talking street smarts, barefoot all the time and smoking a cigarette. I don't know if he's, like, written well. He's also a little bit uncomfy for me, just the depiction of Benji. Like, I think he's supposed to meant to be cute. And Benji, the important thing to note there too is that Benji is 12 years old. He's 12. He's a kid. Marius turns him and his sister Sybil, adopted sister Sybil, into vampires. Sybil's a grown woman, sure. Benji's 12 and he turns him into a vampire as a favor to Armand. He's 12. Like, Sybil and Benji, you couldn't wait 5 years. You couldn't wait 5 years for Benji to grow up a little bit. They made another Claudia situation. Like, we've established kids can't become vampires. They shouldn't become vampires. 17 was too young. He's 12 years old. What? Marius, what were you thinking? I know partially what he was thinking is that it's a favor to Armand because Armand believes that makers and fledglings always turn against each other. It's kind of what happened to Daniel. Daniel just left. And, like, Armand does have this, like, still kind of love but also really hate relationship with Marius. They're still, like, strenuous. So, like, Armand believes that, like, your fledglings will always turn against you. They'll always just hate you. So as Sybil and Benji being vampires, even though they're Armand's companions. Marius made them so they don't hate Armand. I get the dynamic there, but Benji's 12 years old. Why would you subject him to that? And speaking of Claudia, again for a quick second, you know, like I said at the beginning of this video, that like Armand, or we get Armand's side of Claudia's death, right? We get that whole redynamic, recontextualized thing too. Well, things played out exactly the same as he says, but there's this added element, this added scene. It's like a deleted scene in a DVD special features. We get some context around Claudia's death because apparently moments before it happened, Armand took her and Madeline, decapitated both of them, and then stitched Claudia's head onto Madeline's body. And she was still moving around. I did not need that nightmare fuel. And like, this feels weird. It felt weird. Like, and this entire series is inspired and built and sprouted from like her daughter's death, right? And Claudia represented that mourning and that sadness. Why would you do that to Claudia? I know that Armand is like the gremlin, but like, why would he do that? Why would he even think that would work? He claims so that it's like Claudia can feel what it's like to have a grown woman body, but I would also kind of argue, based on what we know about vampire lore and anatomy, Claudia's head stitched onto Madeline's body, I think it was still Madeline's spirit moving the body around, and Claudia's head was just there to watch the whole thing. I don't think she felt anything. Why the hell was he even inspired to try that? He's never been a like Frankenstein type person. There's a disconnect here. There's a disconnect here, and I don't get it. It's a fun horror scene. The horror fan in me loves it, but also like, why is that happening? So there's that about this whole installment. There's that. Took me out of the story a little bit, but I want to go back now to like the framing device. So the important bits are that we meet Sybil and Benji, like they're there, but backtracking a little bit more, like back in Men Not the Devil, I was even surprised that Armand stood in the sun willingly and burst into flames. I don't was like, this book obviously came afterwards. I knew he wasn't dead, and like, yeah, spoilers, he's not. He's fine. He's not fine immediately though, because he does burst into flames and he shoots up like a rocket for some reason. That was entertaining. But then he lands on a roof, and then Sybil and Benji come find him, and they help like nurse him back to health. Okay. And quick point, he mainly survived because he's like old enough to survive now. He's got some ancient blood in him with like Marius and everything, but he's also 500 years old now. He's unlocked that skill of surviving sunlight. And at the very end, in the last little framing device bit with the last like 10 pages or so or whatever, the last little chapter bits, he's reuniting with everyone. Armand is reuniting with everyone. Sybil and Benji are vampires. Okay. I think that kind of describes, pinpoints exactly my feelings for this book. It's just like, what? Okay. But anyway, Armand is reuniting with everyone. Pandora's there too, actually. Love that. He's reunited with Marius. Sybil and Benji are there. Pandora's here hanging out. Everything is all okay, hunky-dory. And then Lestat shows up. Interesting, because he's been comatose on the floor of Dora's church since the end of Memnock. He's just been vampiric comatose and just not moving for days. So yeah, our Lestat, our boy, he's there. He's walking up, and he actually asks if Sybil can play her piano again. That's her whole thing. She's obsessed with the piano. She's obsessed with this one song. She might be a touch autistic, actually. She definitely has a hyperfixation on like the piano and this one song. Okay. So he asks her to play the song again, and she does. She sits down at the piano and she starts playing along, and he just sits on the floor next to her and just listens. Our boy's on his feet. He's working through some things, but he's on his feet. And yeah, that's the majority of my thoughts. This book was so strange. Like, I knew we're getting into some weird stuff in the Vampire Chronicles later on. That we've definitely crested the point where like things are just getting insane. Anne Rice is just doing whatever the hell she wants because she can, and I think she's having fun with it. And like I said, there's peaks and valleys to this book for me, and I think that kind of like evened out to a decent time. I had a decent time with this book. I knew about the Armand and Marius dynamic going in. I knew about that. I didn't remember the other stuff, And Benji's 12. I'm kidding. I am mad at Marius for that. Benji is 12 years old. Why would you do that to him? I didn't even mention Bianca. Quick addition, because like Bianca, she's a human person that Marius and Armand knew back in Venice in the 1500s. Bianca was like a friend of theirs, and during a cataclysmic night, Armand is like he's kidnapped by the Children of Darkness, right? And he never sees Marius and Bianca again for a while. He thinks Bianca's like dead. Last time he saw her, she was human. Well, like a couple hundred years later, Bianca is there as a vampire, and they like lock eyes like across the street. They look at each other, they notice each other, and Armand I think is still like a little like freaked out of like, are you a ghost? Are you here? Am I hallucinating? But no, she is actually there. Bianca is actually there, and we don't know why. I love that. I love how this world in this supernatural gothic setting is just there's machinations going on in the background and we don't even know. I love that. I want to know Bianca's story. Give us more female vampires actually. Please. I know Anne Rice can't write anymore. She's gone. But we have like Gabrielle and we have Pandora as like prominent female vampires, but mostly Pandora really. Gabrielle is a side character for the stat story. But there's also like Maharid and Makare and Jessie. But that's kind of all I can think of. Like, what's Bianca's story here? So up next, not Bianca's story, obviously, is Vittorio the Vampire. I'm going based on like publication dates. So Vittorio is next, and he's totally blind for me. I've never read Vittorio the Vampire. I missed him in my first read through. I didn't know him and Pandora had their own books. I didn't even know who Vittorio was. He's not mentioned later in the series at all, from what I remember. So I don't think he's important. I think he's just a fun side tangent that Anne Rice wanted to experiment with, or maybe she wanted to work on him in later and it wasn't quite working. I don't know what the creative devices were about Vittorio, but I'm on his book now. So he's up next on my reading list, and I am very curious about him. But I will admit, in the meantime, I just finished The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. That was really good. And I'm currently almost done A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. Love that. I have a personal story about that one, actually, that I want to talk about in that video, Natural History of Dragons. And Victoria will probably be like around after them. So yeah, I'm going to sign off. Overall, I did enjoy the book. I had a good time. There are moments where I questioned it, and I'm a little mad at Marius. I'm mad at Marius for what he does to Benji. Okay, but I'm gonna sign off. I'm gonna let go of this book, and I'm gonna move on to Vittorio later. Feel free to like and subscribe. I'm trying out a new kind of like setup at the moment. I don't know. I like it. I hope the candle isn't too annoying because it is like lit and it's like flickering. I don't want to add more maybe like cross-stitching things over on this wall. I have like a dozen little dancing skeleton guys and a couple of like magic books. Oh, wait, actually, this one's one of my favorites. It's a guillotine. I love it. I followed a pattern on Etsy. It was amazing. But yeah, it's a guillotine. I love it. It's bloody. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe, all of that YouTube stuff. I'm going to sign off. And probably going to go watch season 2 again of Interview with the Vampire. We got the teaser for season 3. I've listened to Longface like a dozen times now. It's so good. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to sign off. Y'all have a good day. Bye.